The use declaration, not to be confused by the mod declaration. Do they work together? When do you use which one? That's actually the ultimate question. Let's start with the use declaration. In Rust, the use declaration can be used to bind a full path to a new name. So it's kind of like an alias. Some functions, methods, or types that you want to access in your current scope. However, it's usually denoted through some long, deeply nested sort of path here that you need to take. And if you only want to access this function right here, you don't want to have to always type the my every time. You don't want to have to do this, right? So here, let's compare the two. So if create deeply nested function and my function, you can call it like this if you wanted to, or you can call it like this by using the use statement to help shorten that path. So it's just specifically meant for reducing that overall amount of text that you need. If you're going to be calling this function a lot, it makes sense to alias it. If you're going to call it like once, then it's perfectly fine. Might as well just do it like this. You don't need to waste some of your upper space here in your file. You can just use it like this. And it goes a step further. Check this out. You can also add an as keyword to change the name of the function, because we're doing in the first place is we're aliasing access to these functions here by making it easier, but you might as well have an as function to rename it to something different that you would more frequently use. Like I'd probably shorten it, right? So we just have like fun, for example, and then we can simply just call fun here. And so now you've got this like nice shorter alias to a deeply nested module function. Here's what that mod looks like. Let's take a look. So we've got deeply and deeply, right? We've got these two mods. Let's put these side by side so they're a little easier to see here. Deeply and deeply. Then we've got nested and nested. And note that there's the pub modifier on all these. You need those or else you can't dive in. And you've got function, which is function. And then we've aliased this function as fun. So now that we've got these definitions up here at the top, now we can go into our main and we can directly access the fun alias to the function, and if we run this, we'll see what that output looks like here. Yep, we called our deeply nested function. So the use keyword is very lightweight. It's not like it's importing a whole bunch of anything at all. It's just a type alias, so you can use it as much as you want. Check this out. You can even use it inside of a different scope, an embedded scope, which gives you access to this function if you need it. If you're going to be using it a lot of times, you might as well declare a use alias on this function so you can use it as much as you want. And this is inside an inner block. Once you've exited this function or this scope here, and then you try calling function again, well, guess what? We've got a function defined up here, and it's going to be calling this function. And not to be too confusing, right? We want to make sure that when we write our code, we don't write anything confusing like this. This is confusing in this case, but it's just like a for instance. Like, hey, if this comes up and you happen to be accessing functions that have the same name, you can be in a situation like this. But it's also actually, let's say we do have a function with the same name, like these two names are the same. You could just directly call create deeply nested function, so you denote the difference between the two. But if you wanted, you could alias it like this. In Rust, all files are modules by default. So if you have a file name, that is actually encapsulated inside of a module, which means that you can import that module into other parts of your application and other files, and then access any of the public functions and methods. And there's a keyword that you can use to do that called mod, right? Wait, hold on. We've got a mod keyword that's able to define a module, but you can also use that mod keyword to define and sort of like it's kind of like an import. It's not exactly an import, but it kind of is. This is pretty fantastic because that means modules can be mapped to a file directory hierarchy, which is what we're used to. We're used to having our files and directories, and then we can map those directories and our files as modules. We can break it down. So we're in our root directory here, just any folder that we have, and then we have a my folder, which has a few Rust files, which are modules, right? And then the my keyword here, this my directory, is also accessible. Then we have a my.rs. I don't think you need to have a my.rs and a my together in order to access these files, or do you? What we see here is that we can use the mod declaration here, and it will look for a file name called my.rs. So we're inside of split.rs, which is this file here, which is right next to my.rs. So inside of split.rs, we declare mod my, which is going to be looking for this file right here. This means that we can access the functions that are public inside of my.rs. So we can execute my function like this. And inside of my.rs, we have a public function. And this public function is accessible like this. So now you can call code in a file that's written in another file, which is great because this is how we organize our code. We want to split up our code into logical parts. Now don't go crazy, because you could split tons of directories and hundreds of files. That is a mistake. You don't want to do that, because now you've dramatically bloated the debt overall, and it makes it really hard for anyone who's coming into the project to understand what's going on, because there's just too much modularity. So you have to be careful. It's a lot of power, and you kind of want to split everything up and organize it as cleanly as possible, but you might end up putting too many. My recommendation is to not have any directories, having one source directory, and don't go much deeper than that, unless you really have like a major component that is going to be off to the side that needs its own set of files. Typically most applications don't need that, so just stick everything in one directory and don't go any deeper, because that makes it really easy for anyone new who's coming onto the project. So looking back here, my.rs, we have also a private function. However, you can essentially indirectly access that function through another public function that calls the private function, which is a good way generally to keep your code clean. In this case, if you wanted to make sure that this function is just not accessible anywhere else, you can have an indirect function here that can call your private function and make sure it's public, because this indirect function, because then you can use it here. Oh, but check this out, we got a bonus. Look at this, my nested function. Where is this at? Where did that come from? Here it is. It's in a directory and it's in another file. Oh, look at that. Here's my nested, and we've got a function here. That is so cool. So it works the way you want it to work. You can have a file here and a directory. Oh, that's so cool. All right, I'm a lot happier about this, because that's very flexible. You can have a file that sits right next to your other file that's importing the modules and the code from my.rs. You can also have a folder or any other folder named, and then just access directly. Oh, that is so cool.